welcome to our first Office Hours webinar. And I might just start by saying what Office Hours is and isn't, just in case it's still a mystery to you. The idea is we really love helping our students get better at the topics they've chosen and to help them learn. So we wanted to have a more interactive way of asking have you posing questions and us helping you with any questions you're having around your study. So we thought the Office Hours format might work quite well. The idea is it's not a one-way broadcast. We're not going to be presenting anything per se. We wanted to give you the opportunity to ask any of our trainers, our esteemed trainers, any questions and just to pose it to you, and we'll do our best to answer them. We won't answer things that aren't to do with training, obviously, but we will do our best to tackle any questions you put to us, and of course we'll reserve the right to take it offline if we can't come up with an answer on the spot. We really just want to help you, and if it's a conversation about where you're going with your career, what courses to choose, if there's any parts of the courses or the labs even that you're finding difficult or you'd like some help with, then that's the type of question we just love to tackle for you. Now, today, I am the luckiest guy in the world because my name is Andy, and I have with me Ben Lambert and Eric Magalhaes. And I like to think of Ben and Eric as the two experts in the room. Ben is our DevOps guru, and there isn't much about CI/CD that Ben doesn't know. I'm always very, very pleased working with Ben. He brings a level of expertise and frontline experience on DevOps that always leaves me learning something new. And if you might have been lucky enough to see some of Ben's new courses on an introduction to CI/CD. If you haven't done that course already, I highly recommend you do. It's well worth learning about the process with continuous iteration and continuous deployment. And Eric is our, what I like to call our troubleshooting guru. Like, Eric can find an issue and solve it in the most unusual of places. And Eric comes from a front line of deploying large AWS environments for customers. And there's just so much learning that goes with that type of implementation. And if you have any questions about actual deployments or things or questions, technical questions, you are in the right place, because Ben and Eric are our experts and can create a lot of our content. And I'm here too. I'm just, okay, I've got a little bit of experience with AWS. I've worked with partners as an AWS partner manager. I've worked at technical partners of AWS. Uyala is one of my favorite companies I've worked for in the past. And we were an advanced technology partner and used AWS extensively. So if there's anything you'd like to put to us, we'll do our best to tackle it. I'll just check that Ben and Eric are actually on the line with me. Hi, Ben, are you there?
Andrew, I am here.
That's great. Eric, are you here too?
I'm here too.
Right, great. So we're going to keep this really informal. We just thought it's an opportunity just to sit down around the table. It's called Office Hours because most of us work online and we deal with you mainly in an online forum with courses and labs. So we thought, let's try and put a face and personality to the trainers so that we have an opportunity to share more together as students and trainers. So I've got a few questions popping up in here. I thought while we're letting you get yourselves into the gear of Office Hours, I will just put a little quiz up here. I'd be very interested to know a little more about what type of things you're interested in learning about. We're very interested in hearing what courses you'd like us to be delivering for you, what areas you think we could do more content on. So by all means, have a go at answering any of those questions. And there's been some really interesting announcements coming out from AWS. I mean, that's my area of specialty. So I'm very interested in what AWS is doing. And I'm looking at the results there, and we've got some very interesting splits already. We've got 50% more labs. Well, it looks like we're doing quite well on more quizzes. 39% more mentoring. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Great, I'll just close that off. and I'll just share the results with you so you can get an idea too of what other people are looking at and looking for. So yeah, more quizzes. I mean, those are great. Quizzes are a really good way of learning, aren't they? They really help you shape your knowledge and just to sharpen up your subject matter expertise. The mentoring thing is interesting. Yeah, we're wondering whether there's more we could do to help you, as you're running through courses. So that's a very interesting split. All right, so we've got a couple of questions popping up already here, and I might just take a moment to go through these, and let's get started on trying to pick a few off. So, hello, I've got a question here about Mumbai. Yeah, and it's a recent announcement of interest is that AWS has just launched another region in India, which now brings a total of 11 public regions and 13 regions altogether, including GovCloud in China. So that's a fantastic improvement for the Asia Pacific region. Very exciting for a lot of people, and it's interesting to see such growth happen so quickly. There's two other announcements actually that came out from AWS in the last couple of weeks, which I think are very cool. That API Gateway is now available in APAC, and as is Lambda, and I think a lot of people will be very interested with that. It's two technologies that have had a lot of interest, and having those available in the APAC region as endpoints is very, very exciting for a lot of people. So let's have a look at some questions here. Someone's asked me what's the offer about. Well, there isn't much of an offer. This is just a round table where we want to come together and make ourselves available to you. So if you have any questions about training or any of the courses that you're doing, we'll try and tackle them for you. I've got one here which is an interesting one. I'm planning to take, and by all means, I'm not going to mention your name or who you are. We'll keep it completely anonymous. I'm planning to take AWS courses and certification. Can you suggest where I should start the cloud courses regarding AWS? That's a good question. Who wants to have a go at that one? What do you think, Eric?
Yeah. I think best place to start is going into the console and try a little bit in there and see what you trying to achieve first. And also a great resource would be your solutions architect learning path, because we are going to take people that have no knowledge at all of AWS and taking them to the AWS Certified Solutions Architect.
Yeah, that sounds like a good path, doesn't it? If you do check on the Cloud Academy site, you'll see there's the actual learning paths, and we spend a lot of time curating content so that we can use our worldly experience to try and help you save time. We know how much time you can spend looking around trying to find training, and we spend all our days making sure that you've got in front of you the things that can get you to that point quickly. So the learning paths are fantastic because there's a mix of courses with spot quizzes and most essentially labs, as Eric mentioned, like getting your hands dirty in the console is the best way to learn this technology. But that can be a little bit intimidating at first. If you're new to cloud technologies, then starting with some of the fundamentals courses we have, there's a really good AWS fundamentals course which just explains some of the basics of how cloud computing works. Very useful. And if you feel like you want that first initial warm-up before you actually get straight into the technology, and especially if you're new to technology as a whole, we always assume that everybody's wanting to learn cloud technologies because they already know something else. Well, that's not always the case, right? So if you're actually new and you want to learn computing and cloud computing, then start with those foundation courses. They're very good. Got a really good question here. I'm trying to create, we're jumping into a bit of detail already, this is good. I've been trying to create CloudFormation templates to manage and create and change IAM roles. But the CloudFormation template doesn't allow you to specify the role name directly. Is there a way to get around that? To specify the role name in CloudFormation? Anyone want to have a tackle on that one? Do you want me to repeat it? I'm thinking that what we're being asked here is, can we set a role for our CloudFormation template? And I'm thinking, I'm just wondering what. I'll read it out again, Eric. I've been trying to create CloudFormation templates to manage, create, and change IAM roles. Okay, so the use case is I want to change the role. Yeah, but the
Yeah,
CloudFormation template doesn't allow you to specify the role name directly, so it's a variable. Is there a way to get around that, to specify the role name in CloudFormation?
yeah, not in CloudFormation per se. You'd have to create your custom script, or I'm not sure, but I guess that you can also use those new CloudFormation custom resources where you'd have to create a custom resource, then fire up a CloudFormation template to launch that custom resource. But the downside of doing that is because you'd have to configure first the custom resource, and if you want to allow people to use that same custom resource, you'd have to make this custom resource public. But in this case, I guess that the easiest way to go would be create a custom script, because it's really annoying, those names that CloudFormation generates for not only users and roles, but they use that for other stuff as well. They take the name of the resource that we specify in the CloudFormation template, and they append the CloudFormation stack code to that name. And that, for a production environment, especially talking about IAM users, it's not something that we want. But unfortunately, we can't avoid that easily using only CloudFormation.
Ah, good one. Yeah, I'm thinking that too, Eric. Like, it might be something we could test out. So, the person who sent that in, if you've got a use case or just an example of what you're trying to do, maybe we can help you try and solve that. I'm going to move on to the next question. Can we learn about latest career opportunities in DevOps? Well, that sounds like one for you, Ben.
Yeah. So we have a few courses regarding introduction to DevOps, introduction to CI and CD. They'll help bootstrap your knowledge about DevOps. There's also the DevOps AWS certification. So if you're talking about DevOps as relates to AWS, that exists. Once you've taken kind of the introductory courses, we are working on some more advanced stuff on configuration management tools and CI tools, all the kind of interesting technologies that help you practice DevOps. So some of those exist in the introductory form, and the rest are on their way. There's some interesting stuff like automation engineers, site reliability engineers. These are new kind of roles that are coming into play as DevOps is growing in adoption. So if you want to find out more about those, I would Google stuff like that. Site reliability engineers. It's a fantastic role where you're kind of an ops engineer, but you're kind of a developer. It's a job title that kind of encapsulates what DevOps is as a philosophy. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly a growth area, Ben, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I think DevOps is kind of a natural evolution of the software development lifecycle. It's been called a revolution, and I think it's more of an evolution. And I read something along the same lines that indicates, the cloud has changed a lot for us. We can just push a button and create entire infrastructures that would take weeks to buy, several years back. So we have to do new ways of managing that, and DevOps is that new way of managing all of that complexity that the cloud is giving us access to.
Yeah, I'd hear this a lot from the market that, businesses see the value of a technology, and they hear about it, they see it at roadshows, and they see online how people are using it. And the one thing that's missing for them is people in their teams to help them get to that place. So there's a big void in the market for people who have good DevOps, CI/CD skills. Anyone who's even on the starting rung, there's a lot of demand for that type of skill. And you're in a very powerful position because this is the sort of leading force of the next wave of IT. And I think if you get into this early, you're going to be in a very good place going forward with your career. And you'll be I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how much interest you have. So those courses we've got, I think, are really good intros. DevOps, it is a bit of a black box science, and I feel the same. I mean, I'm a developer, and I feel like I've been so busy working with vendors and partners that I haven't had time to keep up with a lot of the latest innovations in how we develop. I still know how to develop actually with code, but just how the process and the iteration procedures have changed so dramatically, and I think change in a good way. Like there's a lot more rigor around how you actually build and manage infrastructure, and more importantly, how you deploy code. Back in my day, we just deploy and then hope it all worked okay, and then go back and bug fix. So it's very, very interesting, and I think if you are coming into cloud technologies from other areas, then you'll find it really exhilarating, because everything is so much easier, smarter, faster, and better. And if you are starting from the ground rung or the bottom rung and looking to move into cloud computing, then this is the best place to start.
I think it's a good place to start.
Now, I've got a good question here too. It's oh boy, this one's a topical one. I took the AWS Associate level exam, the question reads, and I failed with 40%. What do you recommend I do to improve on that? Yes, the AWS exams are quite a challenge. It's a certification that you earn. There's no free gift with it. You do have to do the preparation. Luckily, there are really good learning paths in our site, so if you're interested in passing that certification, I highly recommend starting with the Solution Architect Associate Learning Path, or the Professional if you're at that level. If you are coming back into it, perhaps you took it a bit too quickly the first time, perhaps you skipped over a few things. I mean, we're all busy people, right? Then I choose the labs. Labs are an effective way for you to get hands-on experience with the console in a safe environment. And you're able to try out ideas, you can spin up environments, and I think the best thing is that you take away a lot of the memory muscle of how to do things in the console. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I only have one thing to add on what you said, is hands-on experience. I need to repeat that as much as I can, because this is, for AWS, this is what makes the difference. You need to have hands-on experience, no matter if you're dealing with the AWS console or the AWS CLI or some SDK. You need to have hands-on experience, because it's much easier to find the right answer when you have done something similar that you're seeing in a question. And AWS have created, they like to create their questions in such a way that they try to force you to have hands-on experience, even if it's not a certification that asks you to have that. Like the solutions architect doesn't ask from you a high amount of hands-on experience, as for example the SysOps certification, but they still make the questions in a way that will be easier for people that have hands-on experience. So if you're feeling frustrated, go to our labs, go to the AWS console, and try to mess around with things. And for sure, in your next attempt, you have much more success.
Can I
good advice, Eric.
interject here?
Yeah.
I think because they don't give this away, like you said, Andy. You have to work for it. And because of that, once you finally get that certification, it's so much more valuable to you and to the employer. So it is a lot of work, like they've conveyed, but it's worth it.
It's really worth it. And there's a lot of businesses out there who are really looking to get certified solution architects and certified SysOps engineers. In the partner program, the AWS partner program, you generally need to have a number of certified solution architects or professional level solution architects, excuse me. So businesses are always looking for that certification. Okay, I've got another good question here. I want to start or enter into a cloud security career. What would be the best place to start? Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll lead off, and then guys just clip in. I think you've chosen a really good area. Like security is a prime focus for AWS. And it's a prime focus for anyone who's deploying cloud technologies. And again, there's a gap in expertise in the market. So if you're able to, be, I suppose, an expert in security early on, it's going to help you position yourself as having something unique in the market. Now, where to get started? I think you need to have a really good foundation. So you need to be across the platform, all areas of the platform, not just the security side. We'll get to that, but have a good foundation. So all of the compute, all storage. You understand networking inside out, and if you have a lot of experience with networking already, using firewalls, stated firewalls, etc., then you're going to find it quite easy to get into the security space. I think starting with data in transit and data at rest, and either of those learning paths on the solution architect can give you quite a good foundation for what protection options there are with AWS. And you've got to remember that AWS has a shared security responsibility model. So while AWS manages the infrastructure layer, the services on top of that are the responsibility of the customer. So having a good understanding of those foundations of how security in the cloud works is going to be a good place to start. So we have some good courses on those topics. And I suggest starting with the Solution Architect Learning Path, because that will give you a good starter. Eric, what do you think? Sorry,
security on the cloud is something, in my opinion, very funny because it's not that hard, but there isn't a lot of people doing it. The greatest thing about the security on the cloud, and I'm not talking only about AWS, I'm talking about any cloud provider out there, because the first question that companies ask when moving to the cloud is it secure? And they, knowing about that, they try to make this very clear for anyone getting into the cloud. So it's very easy to get information, to get the technical details that you need in regards of security. I remember, I was saying the past, but it's not really in the past, but I remember when I was working only on premises environments, and wow, it's so hard to really ensure that your environment is secure because you have so many variables. And all those cloud providers out there, they are trying to make this easier because they are trying to make you move to the cloud. They are trying to attract big companies to move to the cloud. For example, AWS has a service called the Inspector. And what the Inspector does is you have an EC2 instance running, and you install an agent, and this agent will search for security vulnerabilities. And after a while you're running this agent, you can stop it and you can get a report. And in this report you have a lot of things that are being analyzed, and if they are secure or not, how can you improve things, what you need to do. And they went further and they did things like, if you want to be PCI compliant, and it's very hard to be PCI compliant, you have to secure a lot of things, you have to ensure a lot of things. And they created this assessment for you. So it's very simple to just launch an instance and say, hey, I want to be PCI compliant. Please create an assessment for that. And the agent, you assess that for you, and you receive an assessment in the end saying, hey, in just analyzing this instance, you are PCI compliant or not. So wow, it's much easier to achieve security in the cloud. But you need to know where to look. And right now we don't have any specific course for security, but we will have specific security content very soon in our website.
Yeah, it's a specialization. I recommend starting with the security blog, the AWS security blog. I know it sounds rather uninteresting, but this is really an awesome resource. So the team posts some of the common gotchas and compliance type challenges that we field out in the real world about how to pass compliance requests, And I can remember doing so many RFPs where people would ask, you know, do you pass X, Y, and Z? Are you PCI DSS compliant? And if anyone's looking at hosting or private information, then they need to have PCI. Anyone who's doing transactional records of any sort generally likes to have PCI compliance. And one of the key benefits of AWS is that by using the platform, you get a lot of these things out of the box, so to speak. And for businesses who host information in data centers, achieving PCI or HIPAA compliance is a very high bar. And being able to do this using AWS's certification roadmap is a really quick way for businesses to get that level of compliance. Now, inside all of that, there's just all of the day-to-day security things around network access control lists, which is like your sort of outer perimeter or subnet level control, how to set up security groups correctly, you know, which is how you can protect your resources, such as your elastic load balancers and your instances. And there's a lot of things that need to be done correctly in that shared security model. And as Eric said, it's not just about AWS. There's so much opportunity for securing environments and doing best practice in all of the cloud providers. So I think start with those foundations, become an expert in AWS, Google, and Azure. And I think if you've got those foundations well underway, you can do those courses, and you know, if you focus on those, if you have time to focus on those, you can get those foundations in place. You'll then, as someone who's interested in security, see the areas that can be perhaps a bit more of a focus for you next, and we can help you choose which areas those are. And then just become more aware of the security blogs, look at this, the compliance pages, you know, get a handle on just some of these amazing certifications that AWS does have. There's also a good link just under the AWS security page. If you just search for AWS security here, I'm hoping you can see my screen. There's some really good resources in here. So this has been updated regularly, and not only are there good resources for how to get started on compliance, but also some really good case studies for how businesses are actually, you know, migrating to the cloud and using things like ISO 9001 or 27001. You know, HIPAA is an important certification for the healthcare industry. If you're storing patient records, then you need to be HIPAA compliant. The SOCs are also very important ones. And, you know, I think you'll find some really good resources here. So on the left here is a list of all of the certifications that AWS does already have. The well-architected framework also gives some good insight to how to start to think through compliance from the ground up when you're architecting and when you're implementing solutions. And there's a lot of good security best practices white papers. If you have a look on the AWS white papers site, there's some really good ones on just securing your environment. I'd recommend reading them. I know when someone says to us, go read a white paper, we all think immediately, I don't have time for that. But I think these white papers are well worth investing in. They do give you some really good best practice guidance, and you'll find that, you know, you will definitely learn something from the hour or two you put into it. So another good one is a cloud adoption framework that can help identify best practice for implementing a secure framework, how to work with other parts of an organization who have security compliance requirements as well. And yeah, I think just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going down that list there, but there's definitely a couple of security white papers which I think are well worth looking at. All right, Ben, have you got anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, so security in the cloud has a lot of similarities to the classic security. You still want to understand what's going on your servers, right? We're going to be running code on VMs. Knowing what that code's doing, knowing that it's secure, you know, SQL injection checks, cross-site scripting, these sort of things will still exist in the cloud. You got to make sure that the developers understand how to protect their assets. And then there are some great general security certifications out there. Security Plus is a good entry-level one. The CEH certification is kind of the next one up, and OSCP is kind of a practical application of how to actually hack systems, so you understand from the perspective of a hacker what's going on, and I think that's a valuable one too.
Yeah. I'm just reading a question here. So you'll hear silent patches. As I said, we're not presenting anything today. We're just reading your questions and thinking the best way to respond to these. Okay, here's a good one. You just stated that DevOps is the only way forward, or will something else join the area? I'm currently studying for my AWS Solutions Architect Professional, plus was thinking of taking the DevOps course as well. Also, to add this, I have attended courses on Azure. Over to you, Ben.
Sorry, what was the actual question there?
All right, I'll read it again. It's quite a long one. It's well written. Okay. As you just stated, DevOps is DevOps the only way forward, or will something else join that area?
Oh,
I am currently studying for my AWS Solutions Architect Professional, plus I was thinking of taking the DevOps course as well, or DevOps as well. Also, to add to this, I've attended courses on Azure.
Yeah, so the DevOps is currently one of the best tools we have, one of the best mechanisms we have for looking at the complete development lifecycle. So from development all the way to running your code in production and everything in between. It's not the best thing in the universe. Something else will evolve that will be better as technologies keep evolving. But it's more of a philosophy of how you look at that whole process and figure out how to efficiently write the code and get it running in production and running high quality versions. So yes, it's a good thing now. It will eventually change. We probably won't always call it DevOps. It'll have some other name for it. So it is worth learning because it helps you to kind of think about that complete pipeline and the holistic way we develop software. Any courses you can take on it are just going to help you see that whole process in a different way. Solutions Architect is a great thing to know on any platform because it helps you to understand Azure or Google Cloud or AWS as a platform and how you can get the most out of it and implement your DevOps processes on top of those.
Yeah, I've got a good question here. Can you please explain fundamentals of cloud computing? Is it theoretical or labs also included? One for you, Eric?
I didn't get this one quite well.
I'm doing it
Are we
too
asking
quickly.
about the actual course?
Yeah, so I'll read it again. Can you please explain fundamentals of cloud computing? Is it only theoretical or labs also included?
Okay. That's kind of a tricky question because cloud computing is at the same time a lot of things and not so much at the same time. I see cloud computing as putting everything that we learned about IT in the past 20, 30 years and putting that into industry production, like really big production scale, applying everything that we learned in the past years and applying that to deploy things that we used to deploy in weeks or months to deploy those things in 5 minutes. So if you really want to know what's going on beneath cloud computing, so yeah, you have to learn about a lot of concepts. You have to learn about virtualization technologies, the differences between the hypervisors out there, the technologies out there, how they interact with the physical hardware. You have to learn about networking interfaces, storage. So yeah, it will be a lot, but you don't really need to master those things in order to work with cloud computing because it's a trend in the technology that people are doing things now in order for you to just consume. You don't need to be an expert on, for example, Postgres database in order to deploy a high scalable, secure Postgres database. You don't need to be an expert anymore because everybody is trying to deliver that kind of in a package just for you to open and use out of the box. So labs are going to be your best friend in here. only if you want to know 100% what's going on, you know, on the backstage. You should learn about those boring concepts. If you want to really work with cloud computing labs and going on the console, you'll be just fine. I'm seeing a question in here, and it's kind of personal. Not for me, not personal for me, but yeah. I was told that SysOps is next to impossible without years of hands-on experience.
I don't think anyone can answer this as well as you can, Eric. So
Yeah.
I'm going to shut my mouth and let you take this one.
I said that in the last week in our webinar, and I said that a few times in our community, and I'll say that again. I failed the SysOps exam twice, and yeah, it's really hard. It was the hardest exam that I ever took, and they really, really want you to have the hands-on experience. But not only the SysOps exam, all other AWS exams, because they are evolving all the time, and AWS is keeping pushing things, keeping pushing you, keeping pushing the industry, because they don't want to just give you away the certificate. They want you to really have value. They want you to, when you show your certificate, they want you people to respect you, because it's hard. Any AWS exam is hard. And replying to your question, without years of hands-on experience, you don't need years of experience, but you need of a considerable amount of experience. I would say that you can take this certification in at least 3 months, but it will be 3 months of really going in the console, open your terminal and typing commands in the AWS CLI every day and interacting and not being shy, because sometimes we see people talking about elastic map readers, for example, and we are shy, we are okay with the sales pitch, and we don't want to know more about it, and that's not enough for the SysOps exam. You really need to go to the console. You don't need to be a master in EMR, particularly, but you need to go there and deploy at least the sample cluster or whatever they call it.
Yeah, it's a good point, Eric. Like there's a lot of products, and the one thing about SysOps is it does expect you to have a good broad knowledge of all. You know, with the solution architect exam, 60% of the questions are focused on designing highly available, cost-efficient, fault-tolerance systems. So it's very much about how to use the AWS components together to create the best outcome for an end customer. With SysOps, you're going deep into a pretty broad stroke of all of the tools that you'll have high touch with in that real-world environment. And of course, if you're working in the console every day, that's going to seem easy to you. Although I admit, like it is a challenge. The SysOps one is a challenge. So how do you get that real-world experience if you're not actually in a real-world scenario? Then I think, as Eric mentioned, you know, the labs can really help. Do the labs. Just keep doing them. You know, try and do 20 labs, and then you can sharpen up with the quizzes. I always say to people, if you're going to sit an exam, do at least 500 quizzes. And people go, oh, that's so many. I don't have time to do that. I mean, if I had a choice, I think you should do 1,000. Because then you know that you've had all of those use cases and those edge scenarios about what sort of instance to use, you know, when you should do a security group over a network access control list, how you connect things together. There's a lot of things in there that the quizzes can help you to sharpen your knowledge on. And as Eric says, you know, there's nothing beats hands-on experience, but you know, there are ways of you getting that type of exposure using these tools. There's a good question here too about the questions in the exam. It says some of the AWS main exams have multiple choice and multiple answers. Yeah, they do, which is quite tricky. How these questions are evaluated, i.e., if I haven't selected all the correct options, will I get a partial credit? Now, AWS doesn't share how the marking or the actual final result is calculated, so no one knows about that. but from my experience, having done a few exams, if you don't get the all of the options right, you don't get the pass on that question. So I think it's one of the things that makes the questions quite challenging, in that you might have 50% right. And as Eric mentioned, the questions are designed to, really test your knowledge that you actually are competent with doing the questions as they're proposed. So that is the catch with a lot of these, is that you have to get both sides, or sometimes 3 options right, and if you get one wrong, and they can be very finely tuned to sound correct, but the more experience you have, then the more likely you are to choose the correct ones. And certainly in the professional level, that's what makes it such a high bar. Okay, so let's have a look down the list here. Associate AWS, would that be a safe bet than SysOps or DevOps exams per se? Yeah, look, how I rate these, and this is just my own personal opinion, I think DevOps Associate is probably the easiest exam to start with, just that it doesn't perhaps require quite such a broad depth of knowledge. It's more about developers looking at using AWS, so it's quite a good place to start. The Solution Architect Associate is sort of in the middle of the associate group, in that it's challenging and it's not an easy exam by any means, and it is focused very much on designing highly available, cost-efficient, scalable systems. And then the SysOps Associate is, as Eric's mentioned already, probably the hardest of that family, in that it requires a lot more knowledge and a lot more hands-on experience. And then in the professional tier, word on the street, it's all anecdotal of course, is that the DevOps professional is perhaps slightly easier than the solution architect professional. I reserve my right to give an opinion on that. I think both of them are hard, but that's hopefully just giving you a bit of an incentive there. If you do want to just get started with the certifications, then do the DevOps first. If you are looking at becoming a solution architect or a SysOps engineer, then I think start with the Solution Architect Associate exam. Okay, let's see, databases. Now, yeah, I should just say, databases are exciting, aren't they? I find them exciting. One thing that's been released recently by AWS is the AWS Schema Conversion tool. Now, this is a fantastic tool. So basically, it allows you to migrate existing databases to any of the AWS stack, so from any database to Postgres to MySQL. And it's a really very well put together tool, and it's a service as well as a schema conversion tool. I highly recommend having a look at the interested in databases and perhaps thinking are there opportunities to move my existing database to an AWS environment, RDS or otherwise. Then these tools are great because you can basically migrate all your data. It will call out exceptions where there's perhaps PL SQL or stored procedures that may need to be reviewed. It gives you a very good high-level view of any of those areas that may still need to be worked on to do a full conversion. If you're using inner joins or if you have quite complex queries, they're always the problem, aren't they, whenever we're migrating, and when we have a lot of logic in our application layers like stored procedures or PL SQL, then this can help you just identify some of those. And it's fantastic if you have a client who's interested in migrating, and you can just show them what kind of work would be involved with doing a migration. And of course you can then stand up an RDS instance and run it for a period of time just to show them what the costs would be. And so they've got some comparison with what they're currently paying for their environment. And as a learning experience, it's a very interesting place to start with databases because you can perhaps port some of the ones you're currently working with and start to get some hands-on experience with the AWS RDS tools.
Can I jump in and just, before we go on, I just want to say Amazon also has things like Elasticache, so if you want to use kind of a key value Redis or Memcached, that's available. That makes it easier for like session state and for quick lookup stuff. And they have NoSQL options as well for Dynamo, which is we'll say infinitely scalable. I'm using air quotes, but you can't see that. It's an extremely scalable NoSQL database with very fast read and write. So there's more than just SQL options.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love the database tools. I think you know that's one of the real strengths of the durability and high availability that AWS can provide, and the other platforms as well. There's some interesting announcements on SQL Server 2016 is available on AWS now. If you're interested, I recommend subscribing to these announcements from AWS, so you just keep up to date with all the latest. Yeah, it's a good way of keeping yourself fresh with what's coming up. We'll probably walk through these a bit in future office hours, just to help you, I suppose, filter some, because AWS and all the other cloud providers do a lot of updates. So you know, we'll try and simplify these for you, I think. Let us know if that's the sort of thing that would help. You should also be looking to register for reInvent about now. And this is, you know, if you want to be an AWS expert, you need to be at reInvent. It does come at a bit of was an investment involved. You'll get back every dollar you put into it, in my view. If you are working in a business right now as an AWS person, I'd suggest starting to talk to the managements about how you're going to get there in November. The other good thing about reInvent is a lot of the content is broadcast and published through YouTube channels. So, you know, I recommend going through and just sitting through as many of those as you can, because you'll learn something new, and you'll learn something great about how people are using cloud technologies in the real world. Okay, another question here. Okay, so I'm working with a customer and we're moving to the cloud with a hybrid solution. But security is a big aspect, of course. We will be looking heavily on the security aspect of cloud computing due to sensitive information. How would on-premise security work with the cloud security offerings? Okay, well, that's a pretty big start with. I'll lead off, and Eric and Ben just click in when you want. So one of the benefits of AWS and cloud technologies is you can run hybrid environments. If you're looking at having simplifying user experiences for your end users, then you can use federated identity, so that we can use a directory service and have single sign-on. We use what's called STS, or short-term tokens, that allow us to use a role to essentially log in through a directory service. That's one simple way of connecting people to AWS resources. If you're looking at more of the end user, then you can also do, you know, federated identity with identity providers such as Facebook, Google, Amazon, etc. Again, using STS and a role. And there's some really good assets available for those type of hybrid environments. Now, if you are looking at using or coming up with a more high-level security plan for using or starting to use cloud technologies in an existing environment, then I recommend the well-architected framework. I recommend Jeff Barr's blog to have a look through some of the security best practices. The reInvent content from 2015 and 2014 has some really good user stories of how people have migrated environments securely or started to extend their network to incorporate elements of AWS. And there's a kind of customer journey that we see a lot in the market, which is where, you know, at one end we have people who are all in with cloud technologies, and then we have people who at the other end who start experimenting with dev test, who may use backup and restore, and start to grow their usage of AWS. And in those type of environments, the sort of backup restore, it's quite easy to use roles and use Direct Connect and AWS Storage Gateway to create connections between your on-premise storage facilities and AWS storage. So that's all done over IPsec, and you can have, you know, a reasonably secure environment as per whatever your security level requirements are. Then, if you are looking at more integrated environments, then again, using dedicated connections can really help. And you need to be thinking about how to protect data in transit. All of AWS services support SSL, so you know you've got encrypted transport. However, you need to enable that as part of the shared security model that is a service that is provided by AWS, but it's the responsibility of the customer to actually implement data in transit security. And in data at rest, then you've got a number of security options, and there's some very, very good services around Cloud HSM, and some options for how you can have either AWS manage all of your key infrastructure on your behalf, or you can manage the key infrastructure and have AWS manage the keys, or you can do the whole thing yourself and integrate with your existing key management infrastructure. So I think well worth starting with the security blog. That can give you a good insight into how other people are doing it in the real world. And then again, the white papers. White papers are a good place to just delve into what type of considerations you'll have to ensure that you can give the compliance and assurance you'll need to the various levels of your business that will have an interest in ensuring a secure environment. Okay, now let's have a look here. Do we have any plans in bringing AWS exam-like questions where we can have multiple answers for each question? Yes, we do. So it's just really making sure that they're of high value, and we spend our days, Eric, Ben and myself, obsessing over how we can help you get the experience and the knowledge, the body of knowledge you need to be able to get to these levels of certifications and to become cloud experts so that you can migrate and move forward on your careers. And one of the things we want to have is the ability to have multiple answers in the quizzes. Now we've got over 10,000 quiz questions, and having those right and as useful as possible is really important to us. So we want to make sure that before we make any changes that everything's going to work in the way we expect. And we're often told by our students and by industry bodies that our quiz questions are the best out there, and I think they really help you in your training. So yes, we're hoping to bring that to you shortly. Let's have a look here. Okay, when would you use OpsWorks versus Elastic Beanstalk? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so one of the benefits of, I'll just repeat the question, when would you use OpsWorks versus Elastic Beanstalk? Okay, so one of the benefits of AWS is you have all of these great deployment services, and Ben, just jump in here when I run out of steam, which won't be long. I suppose the downside of having so many is just trying to remember which ones should you use and when. And we've got three options with deployment. We've got CloudFormation, which I call the bee's knees. Like CloudFormation is a service that allows you to deploy just about anything in AWS. And it's got a lot of granularity with how you do your deployments, what kind of variety or variance you want to add. And then we've got services that are perhaps more focused on the DevOps system management side, and that's where I put OpsWorks. OpsWorks is a layered platform which can really help automate your basic infrastructure. And again, it's a service. It's got a lot of ability, perhaps a little less if you had to compare it to CloudFormation, but it's very much aimed at DevOps administrators who need to stand up environments and manage them in the most efficient way, mainly due to those layers and the way that we're put together. And then with Elastic Beanstalk I like to think of as more of a application deployment tool. So it's designed really, in my view, to help you deploy applications really quickly. So while it can set up your environment and you can integrate with CloudFormation and OpsWorks with it, it's probably more aimed at developers who want to launch their code. And what it does is it manages a lot of the steps that you'd go through. So perhaps as a developer, you've got the ability to stand up an environment and have it run for you by Elastic Beanstalk. What do you think, Ben? Is there anything there?
Yeah, so you nailed it for the use cases that I would commonly use when working with clients. A lot of the customers we would build apps for, Django apps or Rails apps, they wouldn't have much or anything in the way of IT staff. So we would set them up with a build server that would do the CI/CD stuff, and then it would deploy to Elastic Beanstalk. It scales really well, and really it's pretty hands-off for the clients. So like you said, it's an application deployment mechanism, and it works really well for that. And OpsWorks is kind of that in between. Like if you have a more complex stack, it gives you that granularity. If you're already using something like Chef for maybe provisioning your local development Vagrant machines or some other VM management, then Chef becomes and OpsWorks becomes a really logical choice. So I don't know. I think you kind of really cover that well.
Yep. Just to add a little bit about
one, isn't it? Because a lot of the certification questions are about that type of when should you use a particular service. In the line of fire, you'll know whether OpsWorks is the right solution for you, wouldn't you, Ben? Because if you're feeling that that's got the right level of control, great. CloudFormation on the other side of the coin gives you so much power, and power comes with responsibility, right? So sometimes it's quite good to know which tool will best suit you. On the other side, you don't want to end up limited by starting with the wrong technology and then thinking, oh, well, we could have done with a bit more functionality here. Okay,
I think Eric, you had something. Sorry, Eric, you wanted to add something there.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit more about OpsWorks, I don't have anything else to say about Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk is just you want to deploy an app on AWS. What is the simplest way to go? Elastic Beanstalk. And I was working in my former job with a monitoring tool, which I don't recall the name. It's a very good monitoring tool, but it's very old school. They are not prepared for the cloud and so on. So we need to have more control over operations. We used to do things manually, but we had, I guess it was 20 instances running this monitoring service on. We are monitoring servers and desktops all over the world, so it was huge. The thing is, OpsWorks has an option to use the instance that you're already using, and although it might sound a bit scary when we say, oh, you can use chef recipes to deploy things, but it's not really that scary if you're just consuming those recipes. You don't need to know how to write recipes and how to really use Chef that well in order to use OpsWorks. But the good thing is, I remember that we had to replace the volumes that we have because they were becoming full from times to times because the monitoring tool was distributed and we didn't have a central database, so the logs, all the information were being stored inside the instance, and that was an issue, and we had to address that. So we are writing custom recipes to dump all that information. We are shutting down the instance, and we are changing the EBS volume. Almost doing that almost only with OpsWorks. So it can really help you once you get started with recipes to automate your operations. So not only for DevOps guys, also the operations guys, they will be very well served with OpsWorks.
Yeah, I've just popped a poll up there. Well, I just noticed we're running out of time, unfortunately. We've still got plenty of questions. That was a good answer, Eric. I mean, it's got so many questions here. I wonder if you could let us know, please, out there, if this format is useful to you. We just want to give you the information you need in the most efficient way, and if having this type of session is useful, please vote with your fingers and let us know if it's good or bad. What we'll do is we'll go through this list of questions we have here. We've got a lot of people saying thank you very much for the content. That's good to hear. And we'll try and address these for you and reply. Yeah, okay, I'm going to have to close this out because the thing's going to end in a minute. Unfortunately, using webinar, we only get an hour. So thank you very much for making the time to join us today. We hope it's been useful. If you have any comments or suggestions, please put them forward. We're here to help you, and we're genuinely interested in finding better ways of getting you the information you need. So thank you very much again, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. I've just shared those results because they're interesting, aren't they? A lot of us want more help with certs.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Let us know your thoughts, all right? Whenever you can. We literally work our roadmap around you, and if you tell us what areas you want us to focus on, we'll do everything we can to focus on those areas so that you have the information you need.
Hey, before we go, can I just point out the community forum is a great place to ask more questions. You guys asked some wonderful questions, and I wish we could answer them all. But you can ask the same questions on the community forums. We love to hang out there and answer questions.
Yep.
Yeah, good point, Ben. All right, then, I'm going to hang it up now. Thank you very much.